The brave little worm. Once upon a time, in a cozy corner of a big, bustling garden, there lived a tiny worm named Wiggly. Wiggly wasn't just any worm, he was the bravest, most fearless, most adventurous worm to ever squiggle his way through the soil. At least, that's what he told himself every morning. One sunny day, Wiggly overheard a terrible conversation between two beetles. "Did you hear? The garden is in danger," said Berry Beetle, buzzing nervously. "Yeah. The Bigfoot Stompers are coming tomorrow," replied Brenda Beetle, dramatically holding her antennas to her head. Wiggly wiggled closer, his tiny heart pounding. Bigfoot Stompers? This sounded serious. The beetles noticed him. "Oh no, Wiggly, you should probably hide. Those Bigfoot Stompers will squish you flat." But Wiggly wasn't afraid. Well, okay, he was a little afraid, but he was also determined. If the garden was in trouble, someone had to save it. And who better than the bravest worm in the world? He puffed out his squiggly chest and declared, "I'm going to stop the Bigfoot Stompers." Berry Beetle blinked. Brenda Beetle gasped. And then they both fell over laughing. "A worm? Save the garden? That's the funniest thing I've ever heard," giggled Berry. But Wiggly wasn't discouraged. He had a plan. Well, he would have a plan, just as soon as he figured out what a Bigfoot Stomper was. So, he set off on his biggest adventure yet. Wiggly first went to visit his friend, Shelly the Snail. Shelly was very wise and very, very slow. It took her 3 hours just to turn around and say, "Hello, Shelly. The garden is in danger. The Bigfoot Stompers are coming," Wiggly said, practically bouncing in place. Shelly blinked slowly. "Oh, dear. Big feet, you say?" "Yes. They're huge and they stomp. What do I do?" Shelly thought for a long moment. "Well, maybe ask Mr. Hoot, he knows everything." "Good idea," Wiggly said, already speeding off to find Mr. Hoot the owl. Mr. Hoot was perched high up in a tree, looking very wise indeed. "Ah, Wiggly," he said in his deep voice. "What brings you here?" Wiggly explained the whole situation, hopping from one wiggly end to the other. "The garden needs saving, Mr. Hoot." "What should I do?" Mr. Hoot blinked slowly. Bigfoot Stompers, you say? I believe you're talking about humans." "Humans?" "Yes, Wiggly. Big, stomping humans with big feet. They come through the garden all the time. But if you're quick and clever, you can save yourself and maybe even the garden too." Wiggly gulped. "How?" Mr. Hoot's eyes twinkled. "Humans hate squishy things underfoot. If you can get all the worms to wiggle on the surface when they come, the humans will feel the squish and run away. They'll never step foot in the garden again." Wiggly thought this was the best idea he'd ever heard. He zoomed back to the ground and started gathering his worm friends. Wiggles, Squirmy, and Slinky, all of them listened wide-eyed as Wiggly told them the plan. The next morning, the garden trembled as the Bigfoot Stompers arrived. Wiggly led his army of worms, popping up to the surface just as Mr. Hoot had said. And then it happened. Squish! EWWW! "What's that?" cried one of the humans, hopping around on one foot. "Gross, it's all wiggly and slimy," squealed another. In no time at all, the Bigfoot Stompers were racing out of the garden, leaping over flowers and fences to get away from the wriggling army of worms. They ran so fast, they didn't even notice Mr. Hoot chuckling softly from his tree. Wiggly and his friends celebrated with a victory wiggle. They had saved the garden. Barry and Brenda Beetle buzzed over, looking very impressed. "You did it, Wiggly," Barry said, his little beetle jaw dropping. "Yeah. You're the bravest worm ever," Brenda added, looking a bit embarrassed about laughing at him earlier. Wiggly smiled, feeling proud. Well, someone had to do it. And from that day on, Wiggly was known as the bravest worm in the garden. Sure, he was still tiny, but now everyone knew that even the smallest creatures could have the biggest adventures. The end.